Welcome to the Smarter Science of Slim, the scientifically proven program where you eat more and exercise less to burn fat and boost health.
Eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. I am so ready for that.
Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor and Carrie Brown coming at you here live from the chilly studio in Seattle. It has shifted seasons from slightly rainy to continuously rainy here in Seattle.
That is not fair. It hasn't rained here for like 4 months, and now
That's
it's
true.
Rained for 10 days, but hey.
But yes, we busted out the jackets and we have transitioned to a time of cuddle time.
You left and you took the sunshine with you, and then you came back, but you didn't bring it back. That's what I'm blaming it on.
I did. It was actually down in California. Actually, when this podcast airs, who knows, this may even be available. So we were fortunate enough to, we're working on a nonprofit project, some educational videos, kind of like a, Schoolhouse Rock, the conjunction, what's your function? So like that, but a bit more modern and really trying to...
Do that little wiggle again.
Conjunction, what's your function? But that actually should be coming out in early 2013, so it should be pretty cool. So that's where I was. The sunshine was down there, didn't come back. But we're back now.
Woohoo!
And we've got some exciting stuff to talk about this week, Carrie.
All right.
We're moving on to smarter exercise, how we
Okay.
can exercise less but smarter. And I'm excited.
You're always excited. Hey, I have been writing, my blog, my thing that I do,
Yep.
I've had some questions come in around rice.
Rice. Just rice or...
Not just rice, but how it is that in other cultures, the perception we have is that they eat a lot of the things that you are teaching us
Specifically
make us
rice.
fat.
Specifically rice.
But they're really, really small people.
Yep.
So how does that work?
Gotcha. So just to tease it apart, you said a lot of things. Well, and we'll get to exercise in a second here, folks, but this is a wonderful question. I'd love to take some time to answer it in a little bit of detail, because you'll probably get the same question when you start to talk to people. So a couple things. I think we're talking about rice specifically and not things like candy bars, because there's no culture in the world that eats more junk starches and sweets like candy bars and potato chips than we do in the United States. So
Right.
talking specifically about rice, let's be clear about that. And a couple things, when someone brings this up, it's a great point, and there's no reason to get defensive, but there's 4 things to keep in mind about this. So first of all, rice, in terms of starches, it's still insane. Because it's not particularly satisfying. It's quite aggressive. Actually, white rice has significantly more impact on our blood sugar than table sugar does, significantly. It is not very nutritious, contains very little nutrients, and it's quite efficient at being converted into body fat. That said, it is saner than the dwarf mutant wheat and genetically modified corn that we typically eat in the West. We get our starch from mutant dwarf wheat and genetically modified corn, whereas people in Eastern cultures generally get more of it from rice, which is a more benign starch.
Okay.
So that's sort of point number 1. Point number 2 is that the starch we eat in the U.S. is not the same as the starch we ate 50 years ago or the starch eaten elsewhere, just point blank, like the level of genetic modification, all those kinds of fun things. We are eating different types of starch here in the West, just from an agricultural perspective, than other places in the world. Another thing to keep in mind is that, not everyone who smokes gets lung cancer. That doesn't mean that smoking doesn't lead to lung cancer. It just means that not everyone who does something bad is going to have something bad happen to them. Along those lines, and the last point, and the most important point, is it really is a myth that cultures who eat a lot of rice don't have health problems. There's over 200 million overweight individuals in China. And in fact, in 2012, the Harvard School of Public Health published a study in the British Medical Journal that looked at over 352,000 people from China, Japan, the United States, and Australia over more than 2 decades. So that's a big observational study. And what that study revealed is that people who ate the most rice were 1.5 times more likely to have diabetes than people who ate the least rice. And that correlation was actually stronger for people in Asian countries. And pivoting that data just a little bit differently, you could think of it this way. For every additional large bowl of white rice eaten per day, increased people's risk of diabetes by 10%.
So that's not insignificant.
That's not insignificant at all. So the other things to keep in mind, so 4 points, but let's keep going, Carrie, because this is definitely a point that I think we're going to have to address as we start to go sane. If we actually look at statistics, the stereotype that Eastern cultures are more starch-centric than Western cultures is actually false. The top rice and grain-producing cultures in the world are China, the United States, and India. And if we look at the actual food and agricultural data provided by the United Nations, we find that the amount of starch in the average Chinese or Indian diet is significantly lower than the amount of starch in the average American diet. So they're just eating less food overall, and they're eating less starch. So they are less starch-centric. Finally, this is a cliche. It's not science. Saying that countries in Asia are starch-centric and slim has nothing to do with science, and it's just inaccurate, right? In fact, the countries America Samoa, Kiribati, I believe is how you pronounce it, and French Polynesia are actually the first, second, and third heaviest countries in the world. And they're in that part of the world that, we're stereotyping as saying they're all slim. So that's just not accurate. I would encourage individuals who bring up this to, just get familiarized with the data, get familiarized with the facts. And of course, if eating rice works for you, keep eating it. That's fine. But let's not base our lifestyle on stereotypes. Let's base our lifestyle on science.
I'm not
fair?
for that. I think that's very fair.
Speaking of stereotypes.
Good answer.
Thank you. I pass. Speaking of stereotypes, there's another stereotype, and that stereotype is that people who exercise are slim and people who don't exercise are not slim, and that the only way to be slim is to exercise more. And what we're going to talk about in this podcast and quite a few podcasts to come is how that is not true.
It's not true. I vouch for that.
Carrie vouches for it. Carrie, tell us more.
I used to cycle a hell of a lot and lost no weight, and it annoyed the living daylights out of me. And then I met you and I stopped and I got skinnier.
Well, and it's funny. I heard this quote from a woman, Kim Ray. I can't think of her last name, but she's successfully completed 18 marathons. And over the course of that time in her life, she's gained 18 pounds. And she's like, I've gained 1 pound per marathon I've ran. It's completely maddening. So
I have several girlfriends. I have one girlfriend who took up cycling and in a big way does those mad cycling races and
100 miles
cycles
blah,
around
blah, blah.
Lake Tahoe and whatever. She is the exact same size, weight, shape as she was when she started. How does that work? I have another girlfriend who runs up a mountain every day. She's not a fitness freak. She was just trying to lose weight. Runs up a mountain every day, goes on these tough mudder things and these crazy off-road running. She's getting bigger all the time. Yep.
Well, and we've mentioned this in earlier podcasts, folks, but just to be very clear before we dig into this is not meant to be like the bash exercise is bad for you show. That's not the intention at all. In fact, let's classify quote-unquote exercise into 3 groups. Let's say one group, or you can imagine it like a spectrum. So on the left side of the spectrum, we have very low intensity activity like playing, basketball casually, walking, yoga, stretching, gardening, walking upstairs, mostly just activity. Let's not even call it exercise. So that's on one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the type of very intense but very safe and very low impact, smarter exercise we're going to cover. So that's on the other end of the spectrum. Then there's this thing, and that's extremely good for you as well, much like the low-intensity stuff is. Then you have this stuff in the middle. This is the thing that we're all told to do, and this is the thing that the science is really not in support of, and that's things like jogging, where they're not really intense, and they're very high impact, and we have to do a lot of it, and it stimulates our appetite. So the act of doing it really just wears out our joints and builds up our appetite, and then it's easier to eat calories than it is to burn them off, and that calorie math isn't the point anyway. But even if it was, we would still end up actually consuming more calories as a consequence because, again, it's easier to eat calories than it is to burn them off. So we're not here to say exercise is bad. Please don't hear that. That is false. What we're here to say is let's be smart about how we exercise. Let's do as much low-impact, low-intensity activity as we can. Things like walking, fantastic. Walk as much as you can. And then let's jump all the way to the other end of the spectrum and do things that are extremely safe, extremely sustainable, but work our muscles completely and efficiently, and that's the kind of smarter exercise we're going to cover.
And take 10 minutes a week.
Exactly.
That's my favorite bit.
And it's not, and again, it's not this too good to be true thing, right? Like, just intuitively, we know the higher the quality of an exercise, the less of it we can do. Like, you can't sprint as long as you can walk. It's not because you're lazy, it's because the more intense an exercise is, the more energy it uses, and the faster you use up your energy, the less of it you can do. I mean, it's not, if you drive your car at 200 miles an hour, you're going to be able to drive for less time than if you drive your car at 2 miles an hour. So, shall we drive our car at 200 miles an hour, Carrie?
Let's.
Let's.
I was always up for a bit of speed.
A little bit of speed. The need for speed here at the Smarter Science of Slim. So, let's start with a quote. This is coming from researchers at McMaster University, and they tell us that they thought the findings around smarter exercise were startling because it suggests that the overall volume of exercise people need to do is lower than what's recommended. So, Carrie, let's pop out a second. The reason we need to rethink exercise is because we've basically redefined the way our body works, right? Like we spent the first couple podcasts talking about how we've been taught this calorie counting approach that we need to manually balance calories, and we showed how that is false, how the body is designed to balance our energy balance, or balance our energy balance. It's designed to balance calories just like it balances our blood pressure and our insulin levels and you know, like the sodium levels in our blood. It's designed to do that automatically. We just need to keep it healthy so that it can do that. But if we're going to redefine how the body works, and we're going to say that it's not about counting calories, well, then we've got to redefine the point of exercise, because up until this point, why do we exercise? To burn calories. But we've said that's not the point. Does that make sense?
Right.
So if we're going to redefine how we think about our body, we, of course, have to redefine how we think about how we eat. And then we've got to think about redefining how we exercise.
I must say, for me, the whole eating smarter makes a lot more intuitive sense to me than the exercising smarter. It just, even when you do the exercises, it feels like I've only been exercising for 10 minutes and I'm done. I feel like a fraud. Right? I mean, it's almost unbelievable to me still, after knowing what I know, that 10 minutes of exercise can have the results it does, even though I've had those results from doing it.
Absolutely.
My brain is still going, this cannot work.
Well, you're not alone with that, Carrie. I think people know my story, right? I used to be a trainer, and I was a chronic exerciser, literally exercising multiple times a day. And in fact, this is Jonathan Bailor. This is the guy who did, and yes, I did just refer to myself as in the third person. I did all this research, and it took me literally, I think it was over a 3-year period that I went from exercising every day of the week to my current routine of exercising once a week. It took, because I literally was like, okay, I'll go down to 4. Okay, I'll go down to 3. Okay, 2. Okay, I gotta do 2. And then finally I went down to 1, and that's when I, achieved my current results, and which are the best I've ever had in my life. But if it took me that long, so anyway,
I'm saying nothing.
So the point here, folks, is that we've got to, just like we reprogrammed our mind in terms of how our body worked and in terms of how eating needs to work, we also have to reprogram it in terms of how exercise works. And that's pretty easy, though, right? We talked about how we want to eat more but smarter, because it's all about lowering our set point, and the way we do that is changing our hormones and clearing that hormonal clog, back to the clogged sink. So the point of exercise is the exact same. Exercise is just another tool we have to help us clear out that hormonal clog. So it's not about burning calories. And once we get the burn calories off of our radar, well, then duration and frequency kind of becomes irrelevant, because if the goal has nothing to do with burning calories, but everything to do with triggering hormones, well, it's just like, forget everything you learned about exercise, because all exercise information you've been given up to this point is all predicated on burning calories. And we're saying that doesn't matter at all for our goal, which is hormonally unclogging.
Hey, your favorite thing you've ever said about exercise was the thing about walking doesn't make you grow taller.
Oh, you want to do that explanation?
Yes.
All right,
I
cool.
love that.
Well, walking doesn't make you grow taller? Okay, so Okay, so I'm gonna mix a bunch of analogies here. So I'll do two different analogies: the walking analogy, and then I'm gonna do the reading analogy.
Okay.
And then I may even do the steak knife analogy. Many analogies. Okay, so the walking analogy. Okay, yes. So people will say to me, they'll say, Jonathan, Carrie, I'm tired of referring to myself in third person. So they'll say, Jonathan, isn't walking good for you? And absolutely. And again, we've already clarified that in the podcast, but when people just hear sound bites, they're like, exercise less. What? This doesn't make any sense. Of course, walking is good for you, but walking is good for you. What is it good for you at? It's good for your health, and it's awesome to improve your health. We should walk to improve our health, and it's good at that. However, walking is not good at making us taller. And I know that sounds stupid, but stick with me here for a second. What makes us tall, or short for that matter? Our genetics and our hormones, right? Like children grow because they have growth hormone and they have, tall parents or short parents. Walking doesn't impact our genetics, nor does it impact our hormones. Therefore, walking will never make us taller. And we all get that. That's why we would never be like, hey, Tom, I noticed you like to walk a lot. And if Tom was like, yeah, dude, I'm trying to get taller, we'd be like, Tom, what? That doesn't make any sense. Okay, let me bring this back home. So, however, now, if our goal when we are exercising or walking in particular is to burn fat, well, let's pause for a second here. We know that the levels of fat on our body is determined by what? Our genetics and our hormones. And we already established that walking doesn't impact our genetics nor our hormones. So just like walking won't make us taller because it doesn't impact the factors that determine our height, walking won't make us thinner long term because it doesn't impact the factors that determine our fatness in the long run.
I love that.
Boom!
I just love that.
But again, people are like, well, are you saying don't walk? No. Let me use another analogy here. So, for example, is reading good for you? Of course reading is good for you. Like, we should all read as much as we can, but we would never read.
It depends what you're reading.
Well, it depends. Yes, okay. Well, it's probably still good for you, but maybe anyway. So again, reading is good for you. Should we read more? Yes, we should read more. However, if our goal is to metabolically heal ourselves, reading is not going to do that. Again, walking is like reading. Walking is beautiful for you. Walk and be as active as you possibly can. But please don't do it with the expectation that it's going to heal you hormonally, because it's not. It will keep you healthy and functional, and please do it. But just like you wouldn't read if your goal was long-term fat loss, you would do something else like you're learning on this podcast. You also wouldn't be walking if your goal was long-term fat loss, because while it is good for you, it's not good for that goal.
Right.
Cool?
I love that. Love.
And then I'll do one more analogy here. Hold on. The last analogy has to do with, so we already talked about walking. Let's talk about other forms of exercise, such as these extreme exercises we hear so much about, right? These infomercials that become popular probably once every 5 years. Don't worry, folks. If you're getting tired of seeing these on TV, they will go away soon, and then there won't be any. And then 3 or 4 years from now, there's going to be another batch, because that's the way these things work. And so think about it this way. You see people doing those. They appear to be slim. That's fine. You're going to burn calories. You're going to get some level of results. But think about these extreme forms of exercise, such as these things you see on television with these infomercial DVD programs, like brushing your teeth with a steak knife. Stick with me here. Can someone stick a steak knife in their mouth and remove plaque from their teeth? Yes.
I would imagine they can.
Yes. But why, when there are such safer and more effective ways to get plaque off your teeth? The same thing kind of applies to these extreme workout programs. Can they cause some level of metabolic healing? Yes. Will they build up a sweat? Yes. Will your body release endorphins at the end and you'll feel pretty good? Yes. Are there safer and quicker and more effective ways to do that you can continue for the rest of your life, not just while you're in your early 20s like everyone you see doing those programs? Yes. And that's what we're going to talk about here. We're not going to brush our teeth with steak knives. In fact, we're going to brush our teeth more with those like those Sonicare toothbrushes, which if you've ever used one, that's kind of a mind bender too, because the instructions are you don't actually brush your teeth. You just gently sort of glide them across your teeth. Like, it's key that you don't even apply that much pressure. Whereas even when you use a manual toothbrush, you kind of dig in there a little bit. But believe it or not, these Sonicare toothbrushes, because they're using a different technology, you don't press hard, but the brush actually gets your teeth even cleaner. That's what we're going to talk about here. We're going to use science and technology and our brains to clean our metabolism in a way that is impossible via any other form of exercise. And that is so many analogies. I think that's my analogy quota for the next 5 podcasts.
There was also a lot of arm flailing going on during that.
Well, I missed Carrie. I was out of town, and we enjoy doing these podcasts. So we're getting all of our pent up podcasting energy out on this one. So you guys are getting the brunt of it. So anyway, so hopefully those analogies didn't overwhelm people. But the key point here is when we talk about exercising less but smarter, that's because we're after hormonal healing, not calorie burning. And the way we will exercise to heal our hormones is very different than traditional exercise. Traditional exercise is done frequently. Smarter exercise is done very infrequently. Traditional exercise is done for long periods of time. You know, this is why you have to watch a freaking movie at the gym while you walk on the treadmill for an hour and a half. Whereas smarter exercise is done for very short periods of time. Traditional exercise is done with very little resistance, whereas smarter exercise is done with a lot of resistance. And traditional exercise has a very high injury rate. I mean, I think the statistic is that about 55% of joggers end up getting hurt from jogging, whereas smarter exercise is completely low impact. In fact, it's most popular in physical therapy circles and among seniors because it is so low impact. So sharp contrast, but that's because we're going after a very different goal.
You had me at infrequently.
And for a short period of time. But before we get into all of this, another quick disclaimer, and this podcast, folks, is all about kind of setting the stage, and we'll get into the actual exercise in future podcasts. But again, we're here to talk about science, and you know, if we just want top 10 lists, this isn't the best podcast to listen to for that. But if you want to get educated on how you can change your body and your mind and your life for the rest of your life, we'll give you that foundational stuff here. So speaking of foundational stuff, very common thing that's brought up is when we talk about using a lot of resistance, especially among our female listeners, is the very legitimate concern that, you know, won't that make me get bulky muscles? Very legitimate concern. And let's dispel that, though, because once we understand how our bodies work, we can stop worrying about that. So
I've never worried about that, actually.
You know, but there are some people who do worry about
But yes,
that.
I know.
So we all have a gene called GDF8, and that controls a substance in our body known as myostatin, which controls the amount of muscle we have and how much it can develop naturally. So the base levels of myostatin and muscle in basically all women and most men make it physically impossible for us to naturally build bulky muscles. So it doesn't mean we can't develop sort of like Michelle Obama arms where they're toned and defined and they look fantastic. But it does mean that unless let's talk about women specifically, unless a woman genetically already has bulky muscles, she's not going to develop them from weight training unless she takes steroids, which hopefully no one of our listeners are going to do. So you just, please don't worry about that. It's not something that's going to happen. The only thing that's going to happen when you start strength training is you are going to transform the way your body looks and the way your body fuels itself in a way that no amount of aerobic exercise could ever do. And we'll get into the science of why. But please, you know, even if you don't believe the science, just give it a shot. I promise you won't wake up one day and just have giant bulky muscles. Like, it doesn't, you know, we don't worry about, we're going to lose too much fat too fast. Like, no one is like, oh God, I don't want to start an exercise program because it's going to work too well. That's kind of what we're worried about here. It's like, oh, it's going to work. You know, there's a lot of men who spend a lot of time and a lot of money trying to develop big, bulky muscles, and they can't even do it, right? I mean, if it was that easy to build big, bulky muscles, we'd probably see a lot more people with big, bulky muscles, but we don't. So please free yourself from that concern. There's a lot of things in this world to be concerned about. That's not one of them.
Got it.
You got it?
Got it. I wasn't anyway, but I'll make an extra effort not to be concerned about it.
Well, and one other, I am going to use another analogy. Way to think about this is think of the size of your muscles. So muscular size, kind of like muscular speed. So just like there are people who are genetically fast, and these people who are genetically fast are, you know, able to run faster than most of us, even if we trained all day, every day. There's people who are naturally bulky, and they're going to be more bulky than any of us can become, no matter how hard we try. So again, there's all things we can do to maximize our genetic inheritance, for lack of better terms. Yes, disposition. But again, very few of us have any risk of accidentally becoming an Olympic sprinter. We also have very little risk of accidentally becoming an Olympic powerlifter. It's just not going to happen. So the other thing to keep in mind is doing more repetitions with less weight is really not a great approach. It's really doing a lot of low quality exercise, and a lot of low quality exercise is never going to get us the hormonal reaction we're after. Think of the hormonal reaction. I'm going to use another analogy. This is analogy week at the Smarter Science of Slim. So imagine that you needed to move like a heavy piece of furniture, and you get next to that, like a couch, let's say, and you get next to your couch and you take your pointer finger and you just kind of point and you just poke the couch like I'm just poking Carrie right now. So you poke it 1, 2, 3, 100 times, the couch will never move. It doesn't matter how many low quality pokes you give the couch, never going to move it. However, if you give it one powerful shove.
No, stop. We don't need you to practice on me for that one.
If you give it one powerful shove, it will move. The same thing applies a bit to our hormonal clog. No quantity of low quality movements will ever clear that clog out, whereas a few very high quality pushes will clear it out. So does that make sense?
Intellectually, it makes sense, but I think we've just been so bamboozled with this whole more thing that I logically it makes sense, but emotionally it just feels like that cannot be right. But I know it is because I've experienced it.
And the other thing is, again, not all of this stuff has to like we don't need to wait till it totally makes sense to us for it to start changing our lives. And if you ever need to just sort of don't ever do anything in life on faith alone. I mean, have some other reasons. But one good thing to fall back on, if some of this science just seems like really, is simply to ask yourself, has doing more traditional exercise worked? And if it hasn't, well, doing more of something which hasn't worked is not a particularly effective approach. So why not try something else?
Well, but I also think that 10 minutes a week, it's worth doing a trial,
exactly.
Right? I mean, it's 10 minutes a week, suck it and see. I mean, try it. You will get the results. I know you will. You will. Just, just have enough faith just to try it once. You won't look back. Absolutely.
And one more quick thing, because you will, as you start doing more things like resistance training, which is at the core of what we're going to be talking about in the next couple podcasts, you may hear people throw around this phrase that like muscle weighs more than fat. So let's quickly talk about that phrase because it's a common phrase. So muscle doesn't weigh more than fat, just like a pound of feathers doesn't weigh any less than a pound of lead. Like a pound is a pound is a pound. But what people mean when they say this is that muscle is significantly more dense than fat. So if you were to lose 5 pounds of fat and gain 5 pounds of muscle, your weight would be exactly the same, but your waist would shrink
smaller.
dramatically.
Right.
Like when people see these fitness models, let's use females as an example here, female fitness model on the cover of, Shape or whatever, these women are like, let's say 5'6", 5'7", and, they've got their little halter tops on and, they've got abs, blah, 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 blah. Most people see these women and they think they weigh 110 pounds. That's not true. They weigh about 140. And the reason for that is, see all that toned muscle on their body? That is not taking up a lot of space, but it is dense and it's causing them to weigh more. Unless your goal is to look like, these emaciated runway models, which personally I hope no woman's goal is to look like, because I personally, and this is just Jonathan Bailor's opinion, but I personally like a woman who's got some meat on her bones. That's, I like a woman who looks like a woman. We're going to build some muscle, some tight, compact muscle that's going to make you have those curves and make you look like a woman and not like a board, which I think is a great goal. I prefer when women look like women and not boards. And that is going to potentially cause you to, quote unquote, gain weight, but all of your clothes will fit dramatically better and you will feel dramatically better and you'll feel stronger and you'll feel more capable of just, carrying groceries won't be an issue, picking up kids or doing blah, blah, blah. You'll just be like Superwoman, and that's awesome. So
And you'll look hotter.
You'll look hotter. I don't want to say it, but Carrie can say it.
Which is really why we're here, Jonathan.
Exactly. So, and if...
But that's also...
Yes.
That's why we need to throw our scales away.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. No, it's very true. It's funny. If you go to the Smarter Science of Slim website, type in the search box, or just go to Google and type in like overweight is irrelevant or something like that. And I put a blog post up of me and my dear wife on our wedding day. And it's funny because both my wife and I are, my wife is classified as overweight according to her weight and height, and I am borderline obese according to my weight and height. I posted a little excerpt of our wedding video up there, and I think you'll see that those are not fair characterizations of us. But we both do carry a fair amount of muscle around on our body, so, you know, that's fine. I'll be obese, and my wife can be overweight, but we seem to be enjoying our lives just fine. So, oh well.
I was going to say, when you were talking about, you know, the fitness models, your wife is a perfect example because she's tiny,
yep.
But she doesn't weigh 110 pounds.
Nope. And, you know, when she goes to the gym and she squats more than many of the men at the gym with her, and she, you know, I think my wife is about 5'6", and she weighs, I think, right around 140. But when you see her, most people will be like, what's your wife weigh, 105? You know, no, she weighs 140 pounds, and she can squat easily. Like, she can put more than her body weight on her back and squat down to below parallel and squat back up. I mean, which is pretty cool. And she's got a master's degree, and she's a CPA tax manager in downtown Seattle. So, you know, I'm the luckiest man in the world because I've got, you know, the brains and the beauty, and she's a sweet woman. So, look at this. Oh, it's turning into a sentimental podcast. I love you, Angela. Oh, Carrie just threw up on the floor a little bit. Oh, Carrie's red. Look at Carrie getting him. Oh, she just drank some water, and she's got it. This is awesome. I have to keep going because Carrie's literally about to spit her water out. It's coming out of her nose. Oh, on that note, Carrie's she's literally out. She's literally walking to the corner of the room right now because she's fearing nose splatters. Okay. Well, Carrie's coming back to us. On that note,
let's move on.
On that note, starting next week, we laid the groundwork here, folks. Next week, we're going to start to dig into some principles of high quality exercise, or just like, you know, let's keep these in mind as we start to look forward to how we want to exercise in the future. But hopefully this week gave you some foundational stuff, got the brain moving in the right direction, which is, again, really what we're after. We don't need any more quick fix techniques. We've tried those. We need to reboot our brain, reboot our body, and fundamentally approach this problem differently if we want a different solution, which we do and which we will, and it's going to be pretty awesome.
Awesome.
And Carrie's back with us, folks, so that's good.
I can speak.
Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week. Remember to eat more and exercise less, but smarter. Wait, don't stop listening yet.
You can get fabulous free SANE recipes over at carriebrown.com.
And don't forget your 100% free eating and exercise quick start program, as well as free, fun, daily tips delivered right into your inbox at bailorgroup.com. That's Bailor group.com.